Take another photograph and document a life that's right. And ways consist of simple things, the days of black and white. And faces from a humble past.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back again to Talkin Guff podcast with me, your host, Ruben Django Pouch. We're going to get straight into it and have a chat about what's been happening there between Israel and Palestine. Obviously, on Saturday, the 7th of October, 1,000 members of the military wing of Hamas, Al-Qassam, I think they're called, attacked Israel effectively. They used paratroopers. They compromised the border fence at Gaza and got into Israel basically and killed about 1,300 Israelis and injured several thousand more. I believe a large portion of those deaths were innocent people, non-combatants, women, children, etc. And I just want to start off by saying that we don't condone that sort of stuff here at Talkin Guff whatsoever, regardless of what we think the dynamic or the parameters at play are. That is unacceptable. And just straight off the bat, we'd like to say that we don't condone the actions of Hamas in any way. In fact, I find them deplorable. And the death of innocent men, women and children is unacceptable in my opinion. Okay? And I just want to say that straight off the bat. And I want to offer my condolences to the victims to the innocent victims, Israeli victims of this situation, alright? Who are Hamas? Hamas is a political party, as far as I understand, formed in 1987, I think. 1987 or 1997. I think it's 87. As far as I'm aware, when they first came about, they were supported in some way by Israel because they were adversaries of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Order. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And basically, Hamas became the ruling political party in the Gaza Strip in 2006. My understanding is that they're fundamentalist in nature, and obviously the way they have conducted themselves in this instance, this sort of jihadi situation, which is what it was, going around knocking on people's doors, fucking killing them indiscriminately, that's fucking jihadi terrorism, 100%. I'm not arguing that. And my understanding also is that like Hamas's sort of modus operandi is the eradication of all Israelis from the Middle East. That's my understanding. And again, that's not something that I support. I don't support the eradication of any group of people in the Middle East or anywhere else for that matter. So yeah, that's where we're at. The military wing of the ruling political party, Hamas, has invaded Israel, killed numerous innocent people as well as members of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. They kidnapped a load of Israelis, brought them back to the Gaza Strip. I'm under the impression that those people are now dead, which again is another shocking and barbaric situation that we don't condone here whatsoever. But I think it's important to have a look at the situation and and talk about a couple of the narratives with respect to this situation. One thing I want to ask is, do we feel like the Israeli response to this attack has been proportionate? And that's not really trying. That's irrespective of the nuances or the complexities of this situation. And again, I just say this is a fucking highly complex and nuanced situation that is highly divisive in nature, and it is emotive. You know, there is a lot connected to this situation, and obviously Israel has been a state since 1948. I believe the Zionist movement, members of the Zionist movement in the late 19th century, like the 1880s, started buying land in Palestine. According to Bibi Netanyahu, when the Jewish people and the Zionists started to rebuild that part of the world, that the Palestinians or the Arabs, because they don't even grant them any sort of identity in that respect, as far as Bibi Netanyahu is concerned, they were nothing before the Israelis or before the Zionist Jews turned up and started rebuilding that area. And like I said, at which point the Arabs came out of the woodwork to claim their piece of paradise, according, of course, to Benjamin Netanyahu. But like I'm saying, irrespective of the nuances and the complexities, and you're talking about like, because then there was a partition proposal for 1947 that was abandoned by the Brits. The Israelis did it anyway, proclaimed their independence in 48, were attacked on numerous sides. And that's sort of like the tone. That's how it went for the next 80 years. And I suppose there was the 6 Day War, the Arab-Israeli War, the Nakba, and numerous other total clusterfuck situations in which people died, and as a result, Israel was able to acquire more land than they had been granted in the state of Israel in 48. That's my understanding of the situation. Again, I'm not an expert, and it's so much more complex and nuanced than that. And it goes back even further to the Old Testament, etc. But what I will say is, like, if we want to ask that question, do we think that the response from Israel to this situation has been proportionate? We're going to just have to look at the numbers. You know what I mean? And I suppose right off the bat, I believe the Israeli death toll from this Hamas attack has reached in around 1,300 people. Totally unacceptable, barbaric, right? But in the week and a half following that situation, I believe the Palestinian death toll to now be over 3,000. So I suppose proportionately, the response, the situations don't really align. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I think it's disproportionate for Israel to kill twice as many people in a week than have died as a result of this terrorist attack, okay? And we'll get into that terrorist thing later on, right? And so, yeah, potentially that's a disproportionate response. I don't know. What does anyone else out there think? And then another thing to look at is, like, because obviously there are two sides to this story, and they're both very whatever. There are two sides to this story, and I don't really understand, or I don't have the prerequisite experience or knowledge to understand either side of the argument. I don't come from that area. I don't have any idea what it's like to grow up as an Israeli in Israel, or a Palestinian in the West Bank or in Gaza. But I know that since 2008, 5,000, I think it's 4,680, in around there, there's guts of 5,000 innocent, non-combative men, women and children, Palestinians, have died at the hands of the Israeli state. That's since 2008, right? And in that same time period, 300 non-combatant, innocent Israelis have died. So again, that doesn't seem proportionate to me. And I'm not excusing or exonerating either side of this situation. I'm just saying from a proportion, from a proportional point of view, that 5,000 innocent people killed since 2008 doesn't align with 300 innocent people killed since 2008. So I would say that the situation up until this point has been disproportionate as well, you know? And then obviously the way in which these two groups of people get to live in that area is disproportionate as well. Like in Gaza, they're living in an open air prison effectively, where nothing comes in or out without the green light from Israel, and that's an infringement upon personal freedoms, I suppose. And the whole situation seems to be the whole situation in Gaza seems to be an infringement of basic freedoms. And I would say that people living on the other side of the fence in the state of Israel don't suffer that same infringement of basic freedoms as the Palestinians do. And so the standard of living is also disproportionate, is the point I'm trying to make, all right? A question I want to ask is, like, could Israel have known that this was going to happen? And I suppose, like, Bibi Netanyahu himself said on the Lex Friedman podcast that there's no one who can equal the security and tech security and cyber security prowess of the state of Israel, right? That's out of the horse's mouth itself. And we do know that Israel is the number one developer, producer, whatever you want to say, of security tech and cyber security tech, right? And bearing that in mind, do I potentially think it's a bit suspicious that a far more primitive military force was able to get the jump on the state of Israel? Like, I believe that those fences in Israel are like the fucking most technologically advanced fences on planet Earth. They're worth billions of dollars. They're one-touch security fences. If even a fucking feather touches off these fences, the state of Israel knows, and they can just quite easily look at it via CCTV in one of the most heavily surveilled places on the planet. And like, the border between Gaza and Israel is one of the most heavily patrolled borders on the planet as well. And so I suppose the question I'm trying to ask is, how does the most heavily patrolled border become compromised by Hamas? How does Israel become or run afoul of a cybersecurity attack from Hamas when they're the number one developers of cybersecurity tech in the world? And how does a situation where some of the most secure border fences on the planet are breached, how does, even from an airspace point of view, how do paratroopers paraglide into fucking Israel? It just seems, and I don't mean to belittle or besmirch the innocent lives that have been lost, but it does point, potentially, it does make me suspicious of the situation, and it does make me ask the question, how did that happen? You know what I mean? And another thing that is potentially being communicated by the White House even is that Egypt warned the state of Israel potentially up to a week previous to the attack that a big attack was in the pipeline at the hands of Hamas. So I'm asking you people out there, could Israel have known that this was going to happen previous to the situation? And if that was the case, would they have let this to occur as some sort of like false flag operation? Do you know what I mean? Like, could this attack, could this pending attack, could they have looked at this situation and thought of it as a catalyst, the catalyst required to achieve, like, from Jordan to the sea, I'm pretty sure we know that happens. False flag operations are a thing. They are used to galvanize the general public into accepting war, essentially, and also on a geopolitical stage. If if Israel is attacked in this regard or in this way by Hamas, it allows them to fucking flatten Palestine on a geopolitical stage without any sort of recourse or retribution from other establishments, And obviously, if that were the case, that would be deplorable, wouldn't it? That'd be awful. And you keep hearing this narrative from people like Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro, the ex-prime minister, like the 2020 to 2021 prime minister of Israel. You keep hearing this narrative from them that Hamas will use their own people as human shields because the Middle East is and Islam is morally bankrupt and it's a moral waste ground over there, apparently, according to these lads. Islamophobes, I would have thought. And that's deplorable, and they are saying this in order for us to go, Jesus Christ, that's terrible, and we would never accept that, and by default these people must be bad. And I'm not arguing that they're good, but I'm just saying that if you knew that an attack was going to happen, but you thought it would be advantageous to let it happen because it would then become the catalyst required to wipe Palestine off the face of the planet, surely that's as morally bankrupt, if that is the case, should I say. That would be as morally bankrupt, if not more so, than using human shields as Hamas are being accused of doing. I don't know. It's just a little bit of food for thought. What does anyone else think? Do they think the idea that Israel could have known about this to be totally preposterous? I don't know. Another narrative that's been coming out, and like I must say, like I've always talked about Ben Shapiro on this podcast, yeah, and I've always said that I disagreed wholeheartedly with his his pro-Israeli rhetoric and his anti sort of his pro-Israeli rhetoric, but it was sort of few and far between, and I appreciated how succinct and articulate and intelligent he was. And although I didn't agree with everything that he had to say, I respected the guy and I respected what he had to say. For the most part, that has changed in the wake of this situation, and you know, I won't get too much into it, but he has been given plenty of airtime to fucking spew his hysterical Islamophobic diatribes from, and he looks like exactly what it is he's criticising. He looks like a little yarmulke wearing Hitler himself, just like spewing out this fucking rhetoric, totally, the irony of which is totally lost on it. But anyway, fuck him. What I will say is that part of this narrative, or one of the narratives coming from these sort of people, is that we don't even occupy Gaza. That's their own thing. That's their own problem. That's their own shit show. We have nothing to do with that. And the fact of the matter is that Gaza was occupied until 2005, along with the West Bank, which still is. And if you look under international law, what's happening there is an occupation. According to the United Nations, the ICJ and all, that's a fucking occupation. They are breaking international law, effectively, just by default, right? But this idea that they have sort of given Gaza back to the Palestinians and they're just continuing to fuck it up for themselves because they're morally bankrupt fucking animals is totally ridiculous, in my opinion. And obviously, when in 2005, Israel decided that they were no longer going to occupy the Gaza Strip, and that's what Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro and all are referring to. And so technically, if you looked at it like that, you could say, oh, well, it's not under occupation, but it's under blockade. It has been a blockade state since Israel forcibly removed 9,000 Israelis from the Gaza Strip and turned it into effectively a fucking open-air prison. Just put a wall around it. And they control the flow of food, water and electricity into said open-air prison. So it's like, it's not like, oh, fair play to you, he's gave it back. That's total bullshit. It's a totally erroneous narrative. The fact of the matter is it's a blockade state and it would be fucking hell on earth to be born and raised in the Gaza Strip. No doubt. And so that would be my rebuttal to that sort of pro-Israeli argument. Yeah, you mightn't occupy it, but you've ensured that there's absolutely no future for anyone who comes from that area. And in the same time, you've been shipping tens of thousands, probably over 100,000 fucking lunatic settlers who were unwanted probably in their own communities around the world. Not by virtue of being Jewish, but by virtue of being not very nice people. So you arm them to the teeth and you ship them into the desert in the West Bank. And an Arab's worst nightmare is seeing a little Bedouin tent pop up on his land, because he knows, I'm fucked now. That's an Israeli settler. And they're going to take this. And I could die here. I'm either going to lose my land or I'm going to fucking die. And they'll just do whatever they want because they're the chosen ones. Come on over here. You're the children of God. You can take whatever the fuck you want. Who are they? They're the Muslims. Don't worry. You like that? Take it. And if they say it, and fucking kill them. Right? And that's been happening since 2005. For definite. At the very least. And so that is sort of makes this whole idea that we no longer occupy Gaza moot, in my opinion. What does anyone else think about that? Another little fucking nugget that came out of Ben Shapiro in the midst of this diatribe, that sort of like non-occupation narrative, is that sure, we pay. In fact, Israel pays for the water and electricity because in the aftermath of this situation, Israel has cut off the supply chain of food, electricity, and water into Gaza, and that's a war crime in and of itself from international, as far as international standards are concerned. And Ben Shapiro's whole thing is like, we pay for that electricity and that water and that food, and do you think I'm going to feed and water my enemies? It's just like, these are fucking innocent people living in a fucking blockade state in an open air prison where you control for food, electricity and water. And under no circumstances will I validate Israel blocking the fucking basic humanitarian essentials, necessities for survival. No, I won't. And here's the other thing. I asked someone close to the situation, I said, does Israel pay for that electricity and water and all? And he said, that is a fucking lie. The person I asked said, that's bullshit. He said, every aspect of the blockade state is paid for by the United Nations and the European Union. We pay for that electricity. We pay for that water. And yet Israel wants to paint the narrative like they're these altruists who are helping these people get out of the weeds. It's absolute bullshit, and it's total brainwashing stuff, and I'm shocked that anyone could sign off on that narrative, regardless of their faith, their creed, their religion, you know? And obviously, like, I don't think that those resources should be in Israel's control. I don't think Israel should have control of those very basic necessities, those very basic resources that the Palestinian people obviously need to survive. I am against the idea that Israel is in control of that and they can turn the fucking screws anytime they want. It's fucking sickening, you know? And it's disproportionate. Another narrative, shall I say, that's been coming out of the mouths of Ben Shapiro and Ben Shapiro mainly, and that other guy, the ex-Israeli Prime Minister, who was total pig. I've seen him being interviewed on English TV. He's absolute total pig. And it's just like, do you know what I find? It's just like, well, this is the way it is, because we're the chosen ones. We say whatever the fuck we want. We do whatever the fuck we want. We don't have to sign off on anything that anyone else says, because we are the children of God. We are divine by nature. And I just would like to say this. I've said it before, but especially in the woke 21st century that we live in, you know, in the times of BLM and Me Too and all of these movements that are promoting equality throughout various demographics. I think it's strange that in this world that I've just described there, that we're able to sign off on the idea that this group of people is divine in nature. They're connected to God. They are the children of God. And this is their divine home. And they can do whatever the fuck they want to acquire their historical, biblical, divine home. I just think, like, we're as human beings, I thought we were so past the idea that I am better than you by default. What's going on there? Where are the social justice warriors for this dynamic? I don't know. But yeah, sorry, straight off point there. But another narrative that's been coming out of this situation is that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And I've touched on this so many times before. And I just think the idea that if you criticize the way in which the state of Israel is conducting yourself, then you're anti-Semitic. If the ICJ and the United Nations think that Israel is occupying Palestine, that they are breaking international law, if that's what the United Nations and the ICJ think, does that mean that they're anti-Semitic? I mean, come on, you can't. It's bullshit. You can't link the two. I have no problem with Jews. I mean, I don't actually really know any Jews as well, as the other thing. But like, if you come along to me and go, all right, I'm Jewish, I'm like, all right, mate, what's the story? Let's have a chat. And not even about that, but just generally speaking, what's the story? How are you? You know, I don't care. I'm not religious in any way. You know what I mean? But if you come along and say, look, I'm Israeli, and if I met an Israeli person, I would probably be a bit more like, oh, really? What's your story? Let's have a little chat here, and potentially be a little bit wary, not by default or the virtue of them being Jewish, but by virtue of them being Israeli. Okay? So the idea that you can't criticize the state of Israel without being anti-Semitic is fucking bullshit to me, and it perpetuates the Holocaust. It perpetuates anti-Semitism in order to validate the total obliteration of the people. It's like, you know what I mean? It's fucking oxymoronical in nature. The irony of it is upsetting. What does anyone else think? Do you think anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism by default? Another question I wanted to ask, and like, I think that Israel is a settler colonialist country. That's what I feel it is. It's like America and Australia. They've come there and they said, this is our shit now. And if you got a problem with that, we're going to put you to the boot. And I mean, I wonder What's anyone else's take on that? I had someone saying to me recently that the Jews deserve a home, a homeland. And I was sort of like, well, why do they? Do the Catholics deserve a homeland? Do the Muslims deserve a homeland? He was like, there are many Catholic countries, there are many Muslim countries. I was like, yeah, they're just countries that the predominant religion in is Catholicism, is Muslim, or is Islam. It's not like a homeland. Obviously, I think everyone deserves a home and a sanctuary and a place to be at peace and a place to be safe and secure. But I don't think you can take it from someone else. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think you get it based on... I think it's geographical, not theological. And this is a potentially heavy-handed question. It's like, if you live, even as a non-combatant, in a settler colonialist country, if you are a settler colonialist yourself in a settler colonialist state, does that not blur the parameters of sort of what we would call civil acceptance, or, you know what I mean? Like, obviously, if you're living in a settler colonialist country as a settler and enjoying all the trappings of that colonialist state, while it works to the detriment of the natives, that's a dangerous game. And of course the natives are going to try and kill you. I think that's been the case for every single settler colonialist country that we've seen. And potentially you would argue that this is a settler colonialist country that can't be corrupted with Western vices like alcohol, etc. Opium, prostitution, gambling, you know what I mean? We can't fucking cripple these native populations or the Muslim population like the way they've been able to cripple other native populations in settler colonialist states. I wonder, what do you think of that? What will happen now? I mean, no one really knows, but I do believe, and I talked to someone who's quite close to the situation, that Palestine's existence, or the future of Palestine, has been in question for a long time. And people I know would argue that within 50 years Palestine will be no more, and that whole area from Jordan to the sea will just be the state of Israel. And I suppose it looks like that's going to happen, but at a more accelerated rate than the person I know had suggested originally. And they reckon now that there will be a huge... and it has happened. Initially, Egypt were like, we're not taking these Palestinian refugees. Now Egypt are saying, we're going to take the Palestinian refugees. And there will be a refugee crisis as a result of this situation. And straight away, they reckon Israel will take the north of Gaza back, because it's a security risk, I believe. So they will take that back. Everyone else will flee the situation as Israel totally flattens the place. That's what's really going to happen. Israel is going to flatten Gaza. They're going to take control of the north straight away. Once the place is flattened and everyone is left and there's a refugee crisis happening somewhere else in some other Arab country that we don't care about, they'll just leave it. They'll leave it for a decade or two and then just be like, right, we're taking that back now. And we're going to... That's it. That's now Israel. And the West Bank, obviously... Like, I mean, there is a plan in action for the West Bank, and I've just described it. There's 100,000 settlers there taking land at will from Arab people who have lived there for fucking generations. The same is happening in East Jerusalem. Even people I know, a friend of my brother's colleague who works for the United Nations, has been evicted from his home in East Jerusalem. It's his generational home. There's been 5 generations of his family living in that home in East Jerusalem. It's a holy land for all holy people. He's been evicted. Just like that. Just like you seen in the Louis Theroux documentary. Come in the middle of the night, fuck you out, and that's that. No recourse. No nothing. So obviously that's a plan that's in effect, and it's happening in Jerusalem and in the West Bank. So I'm pretty sure that in the next 20 years we're going to see the state of Israel grow from Jordan to the sea. Alright? What would anyone else's thoughts on that be? Does anyone else have a differing opinion? And again, I don't have necessarily the prerequisite expertise to give to go, this is exactly what's going to happen. But people I know close to the situation have communicated that to me, what I've just communicated to you. Isn't it sad? And I mean, when I first heard about this situation, I was really sad, because I thought that the initial attack from Hamas obviously saw the deaths of hundreds and hundreds of innocent people. And that in and of itself, like, fucking little, or not little kids, but, well, I believe little kids and women, and it's like I said, children and women and everything were killed in their homes in these Israeli settlements or townships close to the border of Gaza. And obviously there's reports that hundreds of festival goers were killed when paramilitary Hamas paratroopers landed in the middle of this big fucking psychedelic trance rave where everyone's kets out of it on yokes on, and fucking killed hundreds of them. And that's awful. It's so sad. And actually what makes it even sadder is that it's all in vain. The only thing that's going to happen as a result of this is more innocent Palestinians are going to be killed. That people, they're just going to be wiped off the face of the planet. So the death of like over 1,000, or say maybe 1,000 innocent people is just going to beget the deaths of even more innocent non-combatant people. And obviously I think the situation over there is really fucking sad and heartbreaking, generally speaking, but this sort of hammered it home. This is like, right, what's happened here has has created a situation that there was no resolution for. There's no resolution to this situation. And I suppose, like, ultra-Zionist Israelis are fanatics. They're religious fundamentalists. Hamas are fanatics. They're religious fundamentalists. And obviously, as long as the mutual doctrine of both of these people is the eradication of each other, we're fucked. And any sort of any idea that this could maybe be fixed seems totally out of reach now as a result of this situation. And I'm not saying that the responsibility for that lies solely at the feet of Hamas, but there is responsibility lying at the feet of Hamas, and obviously there is responsibility for this situation lying at the feet of the state of Israel. And it's a total clusterfuck, and it's really sad because it's sort of made it, it's made that situation definitive, in my opinion. It's just like, this is what's going to happen. They're going to get wiped off the face of the planet. And the other thing about it is, like, if that is what happens, is that a good thing for Israel? You know, is that a positive foundation for the rest of your existence? I don't know. It's fucked. It's so fucked. And I would just like to offer my condolences to all the victims, innocent victims of this situation on both sides. Look, I'm going to be a little bit personal here for a second. And obviously, I've always communicated that I work in the service industry. I'm a chef. I was a nighttime head chef in a restaurant. And just say, up until about May of this year, if you'd asked me how it's going, I'd be like, I'm really happy with myself. I think the food I'm doing now is some of the best I've ever done. I think that I could be onto something here, and I could really build something here and make a little bit of a name for myself. Like, I'm not trying to sit up here and tell you that I'm the best chef ever, that I'm even like I'm Michelin star chef, or even to that degree like a fine dining chef, because I'm not. I'm really good at what I know, but I backdoored it into the industry, so I don't know everything. Obviously no one knows everything, but I know I would have a smaller repertoire than other potentially more well-rounded chefs. But what I do as good as anyone else, if not better. I stand over what I do. What I know, I do really fucking well. Okay? And my thing in my niche, I've carved out a bit of a niche for myself, and it's sort of funky, casual, cool dining, you know? And I'm good at it. And I'm into it. But long story short, it wasn't working. July hit. It seems that a lot of people left the country to go on holidays for the first time in a few years. In other countries, I spoke to many restaurateurs, chefs, etc., people working in the service industry saying, are you feeling the bite here in July as well? Everyone was in the same boat. But unfortunately, it just never picked up in my restaurant. It sort of was going in the right direction, dropped off a bit and plateaued for July, and never went back up. And as a result of that, the gentlemen that I work for have decided to axe the nighttime service. Now, we look at these things through the head and through the heart. And through the head, I understand it. I was in business for myself. I have a lot of respect for these guys. They've been really fucking good to me. They're still really good to me. I wasn't going to lose my job as a result of this situation. They were going to fold me into the daytime. There's plenty of work, basically. So when I look at that situation through the head, I understood it, and that's how I processed it initially. But I'm not going to lie to you, man. 2 weeks after the fact, I started to look at it with the heart. And it hurt. It hurt my little heart. It knocked my confidence big time. It bruised my ego, and I was really upset, actually, a couple of weeks ago. And I will say, look, I was really upset the Friday before this thing we've just spoken about happened. And when that happened, obviously, because I was feeling a little bit like, I fucking really want to win here, you know what I mean? I'm looking for a win somewhere. And obviously, like, when I realised, or when I was aware of what had happened in Palestine, and when all the thoughts that I've just communicated started flooding into my brain, I thought, well, Jesus Christ, man, you're winning by default. You're not there. You know what I mean? You have a future. Like, that's the thing about Gaza. You come from Gaza, you have no future. Politically, professionally, spiritually, emotionally. It's just fucked. Like, there's nothing to do. There's nothing for you. And what would you do in that situation? Sorry, just to get back to the Gaza thing really quickly. What would you do in a situation like that where you had no political, financial, or professional, educational future? What would it drive you to do? Anyway, like I said, I felt a bit silly, or it put into perspective how blessed I am when I saw what was going on in Israel and Palestine. But I was upset, and some of what I was upset about holds water. And like I said, I was feeling like that's an endeavour that I put time and effort and energy into, and I thought it was going a certain way, and then it was a failure, or it was a perceived failure, and I was thinking about other things, like I was like, that didn't go my way, and that's life, man. You just got to keep picking yourself up and going with it. But another part of that was, like, I was looking at this. I was looking at the podcast going, you're off your head, man. Like, people just aren't into it. People aren't connecting with it. And that's what I wanted more than anything. That's all I want from it. I don't want money. I don't want to feel, you know what I mean? I don't want to be famous. I just want to feel like people connect with what I'm saying. And I want to feel like it's good for people. Like, it's a positive thing for people. And I'm starting to think that maybe that's not the case. I'm starting to think that people aren't connecting with it, and it's not a positive thing for people, and that's all right. It's just that's the way it goes sometimes. But the long and short of what I'm trying to say is that I have a couple of ideas for a couple of podcasts I wanted to do, and I'm gonna give myself a bit of time with this. But the reality of it is, if I'm just being totally brutally honest with myself, it's like if I don't get a few wins out of this situation, if it doesn't start to head in the direction that I want it to head in, and not necessarily that I think I should be heading in, or that I deserve to be heading in, but just if it doesn't start moving in the direction that I would like it to head in, then I might have to knock it on the head. We won't do anything crazy for the time being. Like I said, I have a few ideas, and I'm just trying not to get rocked by this situation, and hopefully it does start to go in the direction that I want it to. Anyway, look, peace and love to all y'all mofos out there in the world. I hope you're doing alright. I know this situation that I've talked about in the podcast, the Israel-Palestine situation, has actually has rocked people, you know, probably for some of the same reasons that I've communicated myself, and maybe for other reasons. But now, you know, I just want to reiterate something that I talk about all the time on this podcast. It's like, there's two types of people in this world. There's the haves and the have-nots, and everyone in the have-not, like, I'm a have-not, and if you're a have-not, we're buddies, regardless of where you come from, what your religion is, what the colour of your skin is, what your sexual orientation is. You know, if I'm a have-not and you're a have-not, we're allies, and the rest is all bullshit. And I'll catch you on the flip-flop, alright? Peace and love.
You meant a life, that's right. And ways consist of simple things, the days of black and white. and faces from a humble past at one with the ground, the sound